All right, to set the stage for the next session, let me frame it this way. I think one of the problems most commonly expressed by this community is how to successfully influence other senior leaders in the organization. They struggle with powerful existing orthodoxies, conservative leadership, powerful centralized services, functional silo owners, and even having to deal with very conservative CFOs whose job it seems like it's their job to say no. One of my favorite ways of framing this challenge comes from Ben Horowitz and his construct of ones and twos. So on the next slide, there should be a slide called, there's a famous blog post that was written by Ben Horowitz of Horowitz and Andreessen fame. And he said in the companies that they invest in, they typically have two categories of CEOs. The first is the product visionaries, and the second are the process and execution people. So their definition of ones is the people who are like Elon Musk or maybe Jeff Bezos, people who have a very clear vision of what the product should be like. And so these people love talking to customers, they love playing 8-dimensional chess, and that's actually their preference. They would like to invest in companies that are led by ones. The other category of leaders are the twos. These are the people who love and enjoy the process of a company that runs well. These are people who love process excellence. I think in this community, I would say that for this context, often you are the ones, right? You have a vision of a better way of working, and the people in the way are the twos. So in the programming committee, we've searched for years about what is the right way to help us understand better ways to convince the twos in your companies. And can I get a timer, please, going on the monitors? So let me tell you about something that happened to me where I was unable to convince a group of twos. I had the opportunity to present at a CEO roundtable. These were 50 CEOs of software companies ranging from $100 million in revenue to $2 billion in revenue. And so these are people who live and die by the quality and speed of the software they deliver. So I thought this would be easy. And I gave it my best shot, and I have to say, it did not go terribly well. In fact, someone came up to me afterwards and told me something that I really needed to hear. He said, Gene, you kind of blew it. They totally didn't get it. And that person was Chris O'Malley, the CEO of Compuware, a billion-dollar company. And so I'm so grateful for the help that he's given me, coaching me in terms of how do we communicate more effectively to CEOs. And so that actually led to a session that we did in Las Vegas last year, which is probably one of the most talked about sessions in the conference. And he talked about how do we use the Beatles metaphor, right? How does every John Lennon partner with a Paul McCartney, right? And together, lead the company to where it needs to go. And I think what made it so useful was that in various parts of his careers, he's not only been a 2, but he's also been a 1. So that actually led to a bunch of other questions. So Dr. McKirsten and I actually went to visit him and his team in Detroit and spent a day with him. And we met specifically to meet with the CFO, Joe Aho. And so in the morning, the first thing that was on the agenda was a data center tour. And my reaction with Mick was like, holy cow, why are we getting a data center tour, right? I think I've seen enough halon extinguishers in my life to not have to see another one. And yet it was actually one of the most astonishing things I've ever seen, because here's what we saw. It was empty. Essentially, there were 2 Z mainframes, and on the floor are these outlines of where the racks of servers used to be. And in the middle of each outline, like a dead body in a TV police show, is a placard or a tombstone that says what used to live there, like, for example, EMEA financials or HR systems or email, as well as how much money was saved by getting rid of it. So that led to probably one of the most informative and educational days of my professional career. In fact, I would say the aha moment I left was one of the biggest I've had in my life, and frames so much of what is in the last third of the Unicorn Project. So the ask that I had for Chris O'Malley was this, would he be able to come back with the CFO, Joe Aho, and help teach us how do we better communicate with CFOs and business leaders? So before I bring them out, I just want to address one thing very explicitly. I think some of you might be asking, Gene, why are you bringing a vendor, a CEO of a software company, to come speak to us? And I think it's specifically because that one of the biggest challenges that we have as a technology leadership community is successfully influencing business leadership. And the problem is that often it's a black box. We don't actually get to see what happens inside the black box, and so we get very few chances at bat, and it often seems capricious and random. So here's an incredible opportunity for us to learn how these people think, right, and how we can better influence them. So without any further ado, I'd like to bring out Chris O'Malley and Joe Aho, CEO and CFO of Compuware. Thanks. All right, so the slide I had shown was that picture of that empty data center, which I thought was shocking. I think in this community, there are many people here who are shackled with hundreds of thousands of square feet of vast IT estates that are automating bad business processes, right? And they're having to lug it around for decades. So from a CEO's perspective, why was it so important that you get rid of it all?
Yeah, so give some context to it. When I came to Compuware 5 years ago, the company in recent history had been in a chronic state of decline. So our revenue was going down, down, down. If you go back further in time, the company had enormous growth. Compuware became one of the leading software companies in the marketplace. But at the moment I came there, I was there with a turnaround responsibility, and I was accountable to a turnaround. So when you go through that effort as a CEO, you got to be first urgent about getting a vision. And a vision discovery is talking to customers internal to your business. But you got to have a new way of looking at the market to serve those customers that gets the business inspired and thinking about, man, if we could do that for our customers, they would be infinitely more successful in serving their customers. So you got to get grounded in this vision. The second thing you got to do is have a mission. What is it that Compuware is going to do in terms of a role that's actually going to make that vision come true? And that mission's got to make people think. One, they got to believe they can do it, but it's also got them to recognize we got to change. And not just we as a company, all of us as individuals have got to have new responsibilities, new accountability, if we're actually going to rise up to the point that we can actually make a difference in that vision. And the third thing you got to do is have a strategy. You got to have a sense of prioritization of the things that you do. But you also got to decide what not to do. A really bad leader always amends the list. One more thing we're going to do, one more thing. And a good leader decides that, hey, we got to focus on things, but I got to create latency towards that end. So one of the examples of one of the very first things that I did was I went to my CIO and I said, in 2014, I don't believe in managing x86 servers internally. So this is how I want you to think. Anything that we do on these x86 platforms that create a competitive advantage for us in the market and are things that our customers care about, value that they would see in terms of what we could deliver, I want that on the mainframe. Everything else, I want as a cloud consumed service. So we basically parted the Red Sea, basically made that decision, and then you see the end result of it, of all that going into the cloud. The outcome of that was a couple things. One is we saved $5 million a run rate, and we immediately took all of that money. In a scenario where things were better, cheaper, faster as a result of it, there was really no consequence to putting all those things in the cloud and consuming as service. And then we invested all that money back into value to our customers, in innovation and bringing out new product sets. The second thing it does is it gets you focused on the main thing, which is our customers, right? How much distraction is there in managing that infrastructure that brings no value at all to our customers? And if I can get that all back to our IT staff and have them think and worry about things that are going to make a difference, those are the kind of steps you take in terms of strategy to move the company along.
And specifically, these are things that you would bring up in monthly town halls.
Yeah, so you have to, since the day I started at Compuware, we've done bi-weekly town halls for 5 years. And you have to be a good storyteller. I mean, at the outset, you got a really cynical company that's been in a state of decline for years and years, and they're waiting for another CEO to come in and say, work harder, work smarter, and you got to get them to believe that the world is going to be disrupted, and that if we change and bring more value, that those dynamics in terms of our own success can be changed. So then those make sense in terms of the strategy. The things that we've got to do start to make sense to them, and they start to believe in them. Because you're as much as anything, you're trying to change old habits to new habits. And it's like smoking. Even though people know it's going to kill them, they tend not to give it up, right, easily. So you got to tell them stories so they get bought in, and they believe in that vision, the mission, the strategy.
So what caught my attention so much was something, Joe, that you said as a CFO. You said you're a career-long CFO, and when you first heard Chris's plan, you thought it was crazy. You said, this is never going to work.
He thought I was crazy.
Yeah, he thought
not
you
the
were
plan
crazy.
was crazy.
So, but you changed your mind. So one, why did you think it was crazy? And what changed your mind?
So let me paint you a little picture here. So I'd been at Compuware for about 18 years. We just got bought, taken private. So that causes anxiety with employees whenever that happens. I had never met Chris. Chris comes in as the new CEO, and he says to me, we're going to change everything. We're going to completely redo our G&A infrastructure. We're going to change our go-to-market sales model, and we're going to deliver new technology to the market every 90 days. And I'm sitting here thinking on day one of being a new CFO 5 years ago, I'm like, we're not going to have any employees, or we're going to have a revolt on our hands. So that's why I thought he was crazy. Now, what started to change is exactly what Chris started talking about. He definitely put his sales hat on. The town halls were great. He immediately shifted from, we're not going to worry about any of the decline or what got us here today. Chris started immediately operating with a growth mindset. And he started selling that mission, that vision, the strategy, the goals that supported in these town halls. And you could start seeing, shoulders coming up. You could start seeing smiles. You could start seeing confidence and swagger come back in people. And that's important. Secondly, we rallied around a main thing. I'm assuming every company out there, for whoever you work for, you have a main thing. Ours is a metric called realization rate, which is centered around logo and customer retention. And everything we do, no matter what department you work in or whenever managers sit down with their employees and go over their goals, you can tie it back to the main thing. And lastly, look, I'm a CFO. Tangible results. You got to start seeing something. So when I see our close process go from 22 days to 8 days, when I see how much the software going out 18 quarters in a row, when I see realization rate improving, when I see account management metrics in Salesforce.com, those are things that I can gravitate to, and I can see real tangible benefits coming from the change.
So those are the top line things that might make a CFO smile, but there was something on the bottom line in terms of the cost structure of the company because of what is no longer in the data center. Can you talk about what you achieved in G&A?
Sure. We set out at first, getting together, doing some modeling. And look, every company goes through some top-down planning. Ours was to be under 10% G&A. We thought with our revenue number,
and G&A
is all of your general administrative, your HR, your finance, your legal, your internal IT, administration. So we wanted
that customers don't care about.
Yeah, right, exactly. Did he just call my job unimportant?
You said I was crazy.
Yeah, that's right. So we wanted that to be well below 10%. So we took out the white sheet of paper, which is everyone's dream come true. How many times have you been in a meeting and you say, well, what if we had a white sheet of paper and we did it differently? So we looked at, like Chris said, it was either going to be on the mainframe or it was going to be a cloud consumed service. So for example, we switched from our financial system onto NetSuite. We basically run the company. We kind of joke with a mainframe, with Salesforce.com and with NetSuite. The result of that was less people in certain pockets of the world. So we have a finance team, for example, that sits in Detroit. We have one that sits in Paris. We service the whole company. The result was 6% of our G&A cost. So what that does, again, our goal was to be under 10. We got to 6%, but what we did is we just shifted that money immediately into other things like R&D, which customers do care about. So investing more in putting the customer first and making that change.
And I think the benchmark, your average large organization has a G&A is about 15 to 20% of cost.
Yeah,
right?
Best in class is going to be 10% or under, and like I said, we're at 6%.
Awesome. So when I looked at the empty data center and I saw the applications that you were basically ripping out, EMEA Financial, sales commissioning process, help desk, HR systems, the big question I had was, what the bravery it takes to touch all of those core business processes. And in fact, what was really going through my mind was, was what sort of suicidal maniac would change all those business processes all at once? So what gave you confidence and what gave you the motivation to do all that?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is, again, everything we do is wrapped around the main thing. And we were a company that, we were doing a lot of good things still. I mean, we had good technology, but we weren't the easiest company to do business. And what I mean is, sometimes it was hard for our salespeople to get things done. Our order to cash or order to pay or our commission systems, we were very inconsistent. So you got to establish a consistency around the world to do that stuff simpler and more effective. And I want to make sure everyone understands, the words simple and effective are not mutually exclusive. I mean, simple will be effective. I would argue that with anybody. The worst thing you want to be is complex internally. You don't want to be where it's hard to get business done at your place of work. So what motivated me was, let's make it simpler. Let's get our salespeople and let's get our developers and all of our customer-facing people focused on the right things so they don't have to worry about a lot of this back office stuff.
So just to make sure I hear what you're actually saying. So complexity would be like I have 35 different warehouse management systems, or I have an SAP instance that I can't change anymore. Those all you would say are unnecessary complexity.
Yeah, and the best example I would give you along those lines is, I don't know the exact number, but I think we had like 37 types of comp plans for our sales force. I mean, we went down to one. I mean, there's no reason to introduce those complexities.
And I think there are a lot of, I'm guessing there are a lot of people in the room that are envious of having this top-down level commitment to create complexity in their organizations. Can I get a thumbs up or applause?
Just to add a remark, so Jennifer said in her presentation that you got to consider the risk in the status quo, right, and not making any changes in business as usual. And there's kind of a false sense that if you disrupt these things, that the place will fall apart. And you need to get over that. I mean, simplicity is really, really important in becoming a more agile and nimble business. And convincing yourself that complexity is somehow valuable, important, or can't be overcome, I think is a false reality. And this sunk cost fallacy that people hold, that it's too big to get out of it. I mean, we very, very rapidly basically ripped the guts out of the company and reassembled it, and nobody died. So you just got to have the courage, as you're saying, to actually get the work done.
So you mentioned the word courage, and so one of the questions that I had, looking at that much emptier data center was, how did it feel for the head of IT, right? Because that person actually spent decades putting all that stuff in there, right? I mean, that was that person's job. So can you describe what it felt like for that person, and how you helped support that?
Yeah, in fairness to that person, I mean, they worked for decades to build this castle, and basically day one, I'm coming in saying disassemble it. It's hard to take. I mean, that's a lot of work went into making that a very optimal environment. But I had to explain to that CIO that that isn't making a difference to our customers. Customers aren't going to pay for that stuff that you manage. And it's an effort that you've got to do to kind of reshape their thinking. So for every 2 weeks, just like the town hall, I've sat down with the people who own this two-platform IT initiative in the company, and we talk about it. We talk about why it's important. Every time they have a success, we celebrate it. You saw the equipment that we've taken out of the data center. We have funerals for it. We celebrate the death of each rack as it goes out and the tonnage that we take away. And we go down to the loading dock that's being taken away for recycling. That's important for them to feel a sense that what they're doing is good for the company, because every time they do that, we're harvesting back dollars and time into what's making a difference for the company. And we use the platform like the town hall to make their efforts in disassembling what they've built as part of the success, what's making Compuware better in the eyes of our customers. So it is a journey. It's hard to take. But now as much as they celebrate building the castle, they celebrate that picture. And we do data center tours every time customers come, and they have big smiles on their face. They were able to achieve that and make a difference for the company.
And specifically, you talked about regular meetings you had with them to support them in every step of this journey.
Yeah, so again, every 2 weeks they're meeting with me, we're talking about it. One of the things that when you go through this journey to get rid of all that equipment, there's some stuff that's low-hanging fruit. I mean, the getting rid of your email is an easy thing to do. Going from Oracle to NetSuite is pretty rough. I mean, that's a rough exercise. So it's important that you keep nudging people along and keep giving them a growth mindset, because you do have setbacks, right? Things go wrong, things don't go as planned, take 12 steps back. It's hard, but the CEO, at least in my instance, was actively trying to make sure, regardless of the things that happened that took us sideways, that we kept moving this forward.
So in your Las Vegas session, in the Fireside Chat we did then, you had made this statement that it was very important to you that you were able to fund this incredible DevOps transformation initiative without taking a large restructuring charge. So, Joe, can you help educate us on why is that important? What is a restructuring charge? Why is that bad? And what makes it so amazing that when you can do all this without taking that hit?
Yeah, sure. A couple things. So usually the way it works is when a new regime comes in, you immediately tell the world there's going to be a big restructuring charge. We're going to kind of redo everything. So don't panic. We're going to set aside a big amount of money for restructuring. So near and dear to a CFO.
And by the way, that's code for we're going to fire everybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of severance to be paid, and we're going to redo everything. So what's near and dear to a CFO is, one is we did not do that, so we did not have the cash flow outlay. But even more importantly than that was, what that means is the people that were at Compuware before this transition remained the people afterward. And like Chris has mentioned a couple of times, I mean, there's some salesmanship going on. I mean, there's going to be a new journey. I mean, there's going to be an unbelievable transformation that's coming down the pike. Here's why we're doing it. Here's why we need to do it. Here's how we're going to do it. We want you to come along for the ride. Now, in a room full of technologists, I'm sure they'll agree, and Detroit's the same way at our company, these people are full of passion and full of grit. They want to work on solving customer problems. They want to work in a culture that thrives on innovation, that thrives on risk-taking, that thrives on them giving feedback and knows that it's going to mean something. If you can put all that together, they're going to jump on board. They're going to go through the wall for you. And that was basically the most awesome thing that happened through this journey, was that those same people, we're full of people. Every time we have a town hall, we're celebrating numerous people on slides that have been with the company 15, 20, 25 years. These are the same people now that are walking into that town hall with, just a lot more confidence, a lot more swagger. They know they're working on important things, and that's what was key. That's why that was so important.
And you had mentioned one specific anxiety that you had, like on day one with Chris, right? It's like about what is the worst that could happen, right? If people walked out the door.
Right.
That seemed to you actually a very real risk. And why?
For sure. Let's face it.
Not just him, the board.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Let's face it. People are resistant to change. Again, when you have people that have been doing something for 15, 20 years, they're probably not at a stage of their career where, hey, I've got great news. We're going to totally change the way you work, and we're going to totally change the way the company does business. Are you ready? It's not going to be that simple. It's got to be those constant town halls. It's got to be that constant messaging. It's got to be that constant celebrating of successes, whether they're short-term small successes or long-term. I talk to the company every single quarter about the financials, and it's been good. I will tell you that in most quarters, it's been a very positive message and one that's resonated well because they like the results. However, there's been a couple of hiccups along the way, and your grit and your perseverance and your resistance is really going to come shine through coming off of a bad quarter. We believe in our message, we believe in what we're doing, we have to stay the course, and now's your chance to learn from those mistakes and to get better again. We've had a couple of those as well, but when you go through all of that, people get more and more engaged. Now they're in it, they're living it, and they're just, that passion is going to come through, which is really the name of the game.
Yesterday you actually shared some advice with a bunch of the technology leadership community about as they were sharing their transformation stories and obstacles. And there was one thing that you said about these 2 or 3 metrics that matter. Could you share what that advice that you gave was?
Sure. Employee engagement is one of them. Gallup's done a survey for 30 years, near and dear to a type 2 person, like Gene said. This is real data. And Gallup tells you they have real data that suggests that only 33% of your employees are engaged at your place of work. 50% are not engaged. That doesn't make them bad people. That just means they're basically there from 8 to 5. They're getting their work done and they're going home. 17% are actively disengaged. So we want to do everything we can at our company, which is a big HR initiative, is to turn that around. We think that can be a competitive advantage. So if you can get more of your employees engaged, and then also on the customer satisfaction side, that's the other metric, whether you're using Net Promoter Score, surveys, whatever you're doing, if you can get employee engagement up and you can get customer satisfaction up, I can promise you your CFOs are going to be very happy, and here's why. Because if you get those two right, cash flow is going to take care of itself. So that's an easy bridge for me.
And so that was a very strong claim. And Chris, do you agree with that claim?
Yeah, for hundreds of years, that's been true. The three things that matter most in business are employee engagement, customer sat, and cash flow. And for another 100 years or 2,000 or whatever, for perpetuity, it'll be the same. And if you really think about companies that have been successful, if you go back to GE and Motorola before that, those three factors were the things that were at play that made their success. If you look at Amazon today, if you look at Netflix, it's those three factors that are at play. So the game in terms of how it's played has changed, but those are always the most important things. So I, as a CEO, are constantly thinking about those three things. Is our engagement of our employees getting better? One of the things that I talk about internally, the equivalence of illiteracy in the modern age is an inability to adapt. Everybody's got to be willing to change. And don't think, I challenge everybody in my own company, I challenge you, don't think you got it all right. You got things you got to improve. You got things you got to understand. You got roles and responsibilities that are got to shift over time. You got to be accountable to things that are far more difficult. So all of us have got to have a strong willingness to change. And in terms of customer sat, we exist as a company for the only purpose is to serve at the pleasure of our customers. That's it. And we can never lose sight of the fact that our customers are always wonderfully and beautifully dissatisfied, and we should not run from that, we should run towards that, because in that we'll find ways to innovate and make our products, in fact, better. And then ultimately cash flow, you do this for the purpose of not a charity, right? You're trying to make a profit and serve those that invest in your company and create more opportunities for employees that work within the business. And that's gotten through cash flow. So those three things always should be top of mind for anybody within a company.
And what I love about that is that it's so congruent with what we've been seeing in these experience reports, whether it was Jennifer Woods at RBS, it was Fernando and Benjamin at Adidas, the focus on internal employee engagement as well as customer satisfaction. So I absolutely love the validation of that. Chris, do you have any other last words of advice to share with this community of technology leaders who are desperately trying to get their business leadership on board?
First thing I would say, in the age of software, continuously improving software delivery, velocity, quality, and efficiency is no longer an IT aspiration. It's an absolute business imperative. Because your capacity to compete in the marketplace with, again, these customers that are beautifully and wonderfully dissatisfied is how fast you can take ideas that they care about and then turn them into deliverables that make a difference. And you sit in the middle of that, right? You are doing the things that are critically important towards that end. So you got right on your side. You got right on your side when you get up every day because you're trying to do worthy and noble things that really, really make a difference at the core of your company and their company's competitive strategy. But I will say it's not just that, right? It's the character that you bring. And my mother told me character is defined in setbacks. It's how you respond to those things. And some people respond to setbacks by feeling a sense of failure. I'll never do that again. That was a huge mistake. And they recoil. And they kind of fall prey to the fact that now I'll settle into the familiar. I'll do things that I feel safe in doing, not taking risks. But if you're going to be a party to making the company successful, you've got to have what we call true grit. True Grit's a wonderful movie with John Wayne in it that was my favorite as a child. But true grit to me is you got to have, first and foremost, courage, right? You got to be able to take these setbacks on and not say, bummer, dude. You got to say, hey, that didn't work. But I'm a problem solver. I like challenges. I'm going to stand back up again. I'm going to take another crack at this thing, and I'm going to progress and move forward. And that's just nothing more than part of the learning process. So you got to have that courage. You got to have passion. The speakers that you're going to see on stage here get you excited, get you fired up. They're good storytellers. They're good at talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. They're honest about the quest. They're transparent. You got to have that in you because you're trying to elicit change. Joe said that, on the average, if you're a large organization, only a third of people are engaged. 2/3 don't want any change to happen. None. 17% want you to die if, in fact, you're trying to elicit change. So you get up every morning with 2/3 of the company wanting you not to succeed if you're a change agent. Don't fear that, but you got to have passion that rises up to that challenge. That's really, really important. And that passion can't be situational. It's got to be every day in everything that you do. And then lastly, it's just perseverance. You can't give up. I spend a lot of time with a lot of large enterprises and listen to the struggles that they've got. And it's hard to hear. Because, in this world order, big doesn't beat small. It's fast beats slow. If you're big and fast, you can dominate. But it's really hard to combine those two things, right? It's really hard to be big and to be fast. So a big part of actually making that come true is just absolute perseverance in the face of massive and difficult setbacks. But be fired up. I've got introduced to the community through Gene. I've seen so many people that inspire me. They get me fired up. You can truly make a difference. But when I say you, I don't mean you collectively. I mean you individually. You have a huge responsibility, a huge degree of accountability. Because if you fail, and if you don't succeed in actually making these things come true, I can guarantee you, your companies will fail. They will absolutely fail. So when you go to bed at night, worry about that. When you get up in the morning, be inspired to take on that challenge, because it truly is that important.
Awesome. Well, Joe, Chris, thank you so much for, one, validating the mission that we're on, and two, educating us on better understanding the minds of CFOs and CEOs and both the Type 2s and Type 1s. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.